My sister implied my son wasn't my husband's, nearly destroyed my marriage. But when I discovered her secret pregnancy, I exposed her in front of everyone, and they never saw coming what happened next. I'm 35 years old. I've been married to Matthew for like 11 years. We have 2 kids, Jackson who's 7 and Olivia who's 3, and I work as a sales manager at a software company. I need to tell this story, because what happened last year basically blew up my family in a way I never imagined possible. And even though part of me feels guilty about what I did, the other part, honestly, feels like my sister Stephanie completely deserved it. I don't know, it's complicated, but let me start from the beginning so you understand why I did what I did. Stephanie is 2 years younger than me, she's 33, and our whole lives have been like this, you know, always needing to be the center of attention, always competing with me in everything. When I got engaged, she announced she was pregnant like 2 weeks later, though it turned out to be a false alarm or who knows what really happened with that. When I had Jackson, she started talking constantly about how she and Brian were trying to have a baby, like obsessively, but nothing ever happened. It's exhausting. You know what I mean? Like she always has to overshadow anything good that happens to me, and our parents, mom and dad, well, they've always tried to keep the peace between us, but I know they see what happens. They just don't want to admit it. So we get to my dad's 70th birthday last year, in June. It was at my parents' house. Nothing super elaborate, but we had invited like 40 people, extended family, dad's close friends, neighbors who've known him for years. I arrived early, obviously, helped mom with the food, decorated, organized everything, and Stephanie said she was going to arrive around 2 in the afternoon. 2 in the afternoon became 3, then 4, and when she finally showed up around 4:30, she arrived in this super flashy red dress, sky-high heels, perfect makeup, hair fresh from the salon, and a triumphant entrance like she was a celebrity arriving at the Oscars. Everyone turned to look at her, which I guess was exactly what she wanted. And there I was, in my simple blouse and jeans, helping serve food, feeling like a housekeeper in comparison. But anyway, that's typical Stephanie. So I let it go. The party was going well, Dad was happy, people were eating, Jackson was playing with his cousins in the yard, Olivia was in Matthew's arms, everything normal. And then Stephanie approached the group where I was with Matthew, my uncle Roberto, my cousin Claudia, and a couple of Dad's friends. She'd had like 3 glasses of wine already, which is also typical of her, and she started talking loudly, like so everyone could hear. She said something like, "Oh, Sarah, every time I see Jackson, I'm surprised because honestly he doesn't look anything like Matthew." And then she laughed like it was the funniest joke in the world. I froze. I literally felt like someone had thrown a bucket of cold water on me. Matthew was right there next to me, and I saw how his face changed, and the people around us fell into uncomfortable silence. You know, that horrible silence where nobody knows whether to laugh or pretend they didn't hear anything. Stephanie continued, "No, seriously, I mean, you dated that guy before Matthew? What was his name? Derek? Jackson has Derek's eyes, doesn't he?" And she laughed again. And I wanted to disappear. I wanted the earth to swallow me right there. I told her, "Stephanie, what the hell are you saying?" And she put on that fake innocent face she always puts on and said, "Oh no, it's just a joke, Sarah. Relax, don't be so sensitive." But the damage was already done. You know what I mean? Because Matthew didn't say anything in that moment. He just stood there with Olivia in his arms, and I could see in his eyes that something had changed. I tried to laugh and change the subject, but everyone was looking at us weird. And my uncle Roberto tried to make a joke about something else, but nobody laughed, and basically the rest of the party was a disaster for me, because I couldn't stop thinking about what Stephanie had said and how Matthew kept being quiet and distant. On the way home that night, Matthew didn't talk. Nothing. I put music on the radio, tried to make conversation about the party, about how nice the cake was, about how Jackson had fun with his cousins, and he just responded with monosyllables or grunts. When we got home and put the kids to bed, I thought we were finally going to talk about what had happened, but he just said, "I'm tired, I'm going to sleep," and got into bed with his back to me. And that's how the hell of the next 2 months began. Matthew became distant, cold, suspicious. He started looking at Jackson differently, like analyzing him, looking for features he didn't recognize in him. He stopped being affectionate with me, barely touched me. And when I tried to talk to him about what Stephanie had said, he'd tell me it was nothing, that I was exaggerating. But I knew it was something. That the seed of doubt my sister, had planted was growing in his head. I tried calling Stephanie to confront her. I sent her like 20 messages asking her why she'd said that, begging her to talk to Matthew and explain it had just been a stupid joke. But she responded with vague things like, "Oh, Sarah, always so dramatic. It was just a comment. Get over it." Things got worse when one day, like 3 weeks after the party, Matthew came home after work and left an envelope on the kitchen table. I was making dinner and I asked him what it was, and he said without looking at me, "It's a paternity test kit." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I said, "What? Are you serious, Matthew?" And he finally looked at me and said, "I need to know, Sarah. I need to be sure." And I exploded. I yelled at him how could he even think that? That Jackson was his son. That he'd been with me throughout the whole pregnancy. That he'd seen Jackson being born. That this was crazy. But he just kept saying he needed to be sure. That he couldn't get it out of his head. I cried. I begged. I told him that doing that test on Jackson was going to damage our family, that it was giving Stephanie and her malicious comments validation. But Matthew was determined. And honestly, in that moment, I started to hate my sister with an intensity I'd never felt before. Like she had taken my happy marriage, my stable family, and poisoned it with a single sentence at a party, and she didn't even seem to care. So I agreed to do the test because, what else could I do? Jackson is his biological son. I knew it with absolute certainty, but I needed Matthew to know it too, so this would end. We did the test on a Saturday morning. Matthew took a saliva sample from Jackson with a swab. Poor kid didn't even understand what was happening. He thought it was some kind of game. We sent the samples to the lab and they told us the results would take like 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks were the worst of my life. I'm not exaggerating. Matthew and I didn't talk except to coordinate things with the kids. We slept in the same room, but we might as well have been on different planets. And I spent my time crying in the bathroom when the kids couldn't see me. I called my mom to tell her what was happening and she was horrified. She told me she was going to talk to Stephanie, but I told her no, that it was too late for that the damage was done. The results finally arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Matthew opened them, read them, and I saw how his shoulders relaxed and his face changed. He said, "Sarah, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," and started crying. The test confirmed with 99.99% certainty that he was Jackson's biological father. I should have felt relief, I guess. But what I felt was rage. Rage toward Stephanie for creating this. Rage toward Matthew for having doubted me. Rage toward the whole situation. I said, "Okay, now you know. What now?" And he tried to hug me, but I pulled away. I couldn't. Not in that moment. A few days passed, and the rage toward Stephanie kept growing. I couldn't stop thinking about how she'd destroyed my marital trust, how she'd made my husband doubt me, how she hadn't even had the decency to apologize or acknowledge the damage she'd caused. And then, I don't know, something in me broke or activated. And I decided that if she could destroy my life with one malicious comment, I could investigate a little and see if her perfect life was really as perfect as she always bragged about. I started with the obvious, her social media. Stephanie was super active on Instagram, constantly posting photos, always at expensive restaurants, trips, designer clothes, and I knew Brian worked as an accountant at a mid-sized firm. He didn't make bad money, but not enough for that lifestyle she was showing off. I started noticing weird things, like there were photos where she appeared with a guy in several different places, restaurants, a bar, once in what looked like a hotel, and although the photos were taken in a way that it wasn't super obvious they were together, if you paid attention you could see they were. The guy was younger, like he was maybe 25 or 26, blonde hair, tattoos on his arms, very different from Brian, who's more formal and conservative. I kept investigating, created a fake Instagram profile to be able to see more closely, and found that this guy, whose name was Chase according to his profile, also posted photos in the same places and sometimes at the same times as Stephanie. There weren't obvious photos together, but the patterns were clear if you looked for them. Then, and this was basically the gold mine, I found a comment someone had left on one of Stephanie's photos where they said something like, "Saw you at your other job last night. You look amazing." And Stephanie had deleted the comment quickly, but I managed to capture a screenshot before. I started investigating what that other job could be, and after searching and searching, I found an OnlyFans account with photos that, although they were edited to hide the face, had the same tattoo that Stephanie has on her right shoulder, a small sunflower she got when she turned 21. The jewelry was the same she wore in her Instagram photos. The background of some photos was clearly her bedroom. I recognized the lamp and the color of the walls. It was her, without a doubt, uploading explicit content to OnlyFans while Brian worked to support them, and she publicly cried about how they couldn't have children. I saved everything. Screenshots, links, dates, photos. I organized it all in a folder on my computer and waited. I didn't know what I was going to do with that information, but I knew at some point I was going to use it. Matthew and I were trying to rebuild our marriage. We went to couples therapy, talked a lot about trust and the damage that had been done, and slowly things started to improve between us. But every time I saw Stephanie at family gatherings, acting like nothing had happened, showing off her perfect life, I felt that rage bubbling inside me. Then in October, like 4 months after Dad's birthday, Stephanie announced she was pregnant. Finally, after years of trying, she was pregnant. My mom was super excited. Dad too. Everyone was celebrating. And I just stood there with a fake smile, thinking about everything I knew. Brian seemed genuinely happy. Poor guy had no idea about anything. Stephanie posted photos of the ultrasound, started buying things for the baby, made a whole show on social media, and I just waited, observed. My mom decided to organize a gender reveal party for Stephanie in January, when she'd be like 6 months along. It was going to be at my parents' house again, with family and close friends, nothing too big but significant. I helped plan the party, even made the reveal cake, a white cake that when cut would reveal if it was a boy or girl with the color of the filling. Matthew asked me several times if I was okay helping with the party, considering everything that had happened, and I told him yes, that I wanted to make peace with Stephanie, that it was important for Mom and Dad. He believed me. The truth is, I had other plans. The day of the party arrived. It was a cold Saturday in January, around 3 in the afternoon. There were about 30 people there, including Brian, who was super excited, my parents, aunts and uncles, cousins, Stephanie's friends. We were all in the living room, waiting for the big moment to cut the cake, when I decided to act. I stood up, asked for everyone's attention, and said I wanted to make a toast to my sister. Stephanie was radiant, smiling, in her maternity dress, thinking I was finally being the supportive older sister she always said I should be. I raised my glass and said something like, I want to toast to my sister, Stephanie, who's finally going to be a mother after trying for so long. And everyone raised their glasses, smiling. And then I continued, I also want to toast to her honesty and transparency, because we all know how important honesty is in a family, and I think everyone here deserves to know some interesting facts about the mother-to-be. And I saw how Stephanie's face changed, how fear started appearing in her eyes. I took out my phone and said, for example, did you know that Stephanie has been having an affair with a guy named Chase for at least 8 months? And before anyone could react, I put the photos on the TV screen that was connected to show baby shower photos. But instead, I showed the screenshots I'd compiled of Stephanie and Chase in different places. The dates, the messages I'd managed to capture. The room went absolutely silent. Brian stood up, completely pale, looking at the photos. Stephanie started screaming that I was a liar, that it was Photoshop, that I was jealous of her pregnancy. But I continued. I said, and that's not all. She also has an OnlyFans account where she uploads explicit content. If anyone's interested, here's the link. And I showed the photos, the ones that were clearly of her because of the tattoo, the jewelry, the background of her house. My mom put her hands over her mouth. My dad sat there like in shock. And Brian, poor Brian, started walking toward the door. Stephanie attacked me, literally lunged at me, screaming that I'd ruined her life, that I was a bitch, that she hated me, and Matthew had to pull her off me. The party obviously ended there. People started leaving uncomfortably, some trying to console Brian, who had stayed in the yard crying, others whispering among themselves. My parents looked at me with a mixture of horror and confusion, like they couldn't believe I'd done that. And Stephanie kept screaming, calling me everything, saying I'd planned this because I was jealous, that I'd always been jealous of her. I said in front of everyone, jealous? Jealous of what, Stephanie? That you almost destroyed my marriage with your poisonous comments at Dad's birthday? That you made my husband doubt that our son was his? Of your affair? Of your double life? And then the room went quiet, because nobody except Matthew knew what had happened with the paternity comment and its consequences. Stephanie went even paler, and Brian, who was still there, asked, "What paternity comment?" I told him everything. I told him how Stephanie had insinuated that Jackson wasn't Matthew's son, how we'd had to do a paternity test, how my marriage almost fell apart because of her words. Brian looked at me with tears in his eyes and then looked at Stephanie and said, "You did that? Why would you do something like that?" And Stephanie had no answer. Just stammered senseless excuses. Brian left after that. He just grabbed his keys and left. And Stephanie stood there in the middle of the room in her maternity dress with her whole world crumbling around her. The following months were absolute chaos. Brian asked for a divorce immediately and also demanded a paternity test. Stephanie moved back in. With my parents, cried constantly, tried to call me to insult me or to beg me to help her fix things with Brian, alternated between both. I didn't respond. Matthew asked me several times if I felt okay about what I'd done, if I didn't regret it. And honestly, I didn't know how to answer. Part of me felt horrible for having destroyed the gender reveal party and for having exposed everything so publicly. But another part, the part that was still angry about what she'd done to me, felt like she completely deserved it. Stephanie gave birth in April, a girl. My parents went to the hospital. Brian didn't. I didn't either. I couldn't. I didn't want to. The baby was born healthy, like 7.5 pounds, and when my mom sent me photos, it was obvious even to someone without much knowledge about babies that this girl didn't look anything like Brian. She had light blonde hair, blue eyes, features neither of them had. Brian has dark brown hair and brown eyes. Stephanie has brown hair and green eyes. The paternity test Brian had demanded came 2 weeks after the birth and confirmed what we all already knew. He wasn't the father. My mom told me later, like in June, that she'd overheard a phone conversation where Stephanie was telling someone, probably Chase, that yes, he was the baby's biological father. Apparently, Stephanie had tried to contact Chase throughout the pregnancy to tell him, but he'd blocked her everywhere. After the birth, when she finally managed to contact him somehow, he told her he wanted nothing to do with her or the baby, that she'd ruined her own life with her decisions and that he wasn't going to be part of that mess. He basically abandoned her completely. Brian finalized the divorce in July. He kept the house, they divided the assets, and he made it very clear he never wanted to see or hear from Stephanie again in his life. I understand him completely, honestly. Stephanie now lives with my parents at their house, in her old room, with a baby. She's completely alone taking care of. She doesn't have a job because she quit her job as an administrative assistant when she started the OnlyFans, and now obviously she can't go back to that. My parents help her financially, but I've noticed their patience is running out because Stephanie doesn't seem to want to change or take real responsibility for her actions. She just victimizes herself constantly and blames everyone else, especially me. Matthew and I are still in therapy. We've had to work a lot on rebuilding the trust that was damaged, not just because of what Stephanie said, but also because of how he reacted and how I handled my revenge. Our therapist has helped us understand that what happened was traumatic for our relationship, but that we can overcome it if we commit to being completely honest and open with each other. Things are better now, much better than a year ago. But there are still moments where I see Matthew looking at Jackson, and I know he's thinking about everything that happened, and it hurts that that doubt exists even if minimal. My relationship with my parents is tense. They understand why I did what I did, especially after I explained everything about the paternity test and how I almost lost my marriage, but they still think the way I did it was cruel and unnecessary, that I could have handled things differently. Maybe they're right. I don't know. My dad told me recently that both of us, Stephanie and I, are his daughters, and that he's not going to choose sides, but that he's disappointed in how we both handled our conflicts. I guess that's fair, although I still think what I did was in response to what she did first. I haven't spoken to Stephanie since the reveal party. She's tried to contact me several times. Long messages where sometimes she insults me and other times she asks for forgiveness, but I don't respond. Matthew says that eventually I'm going to have to decide if I want to forgive her or at least have some kind of the relationship for the sake of the family, but honestly, I don't know if I can or if I want to. Every time I think about her, I think about those 2 weeks waiting for the paternity test results, about how Matthew looked at me with distrust, about how I cried in the bathroom so my kids wouldn't see me, and the rage comes back. Last week, my mom called to say that Stephanie wants to organize a family meeting where we can all talk, like an informal mediation, to try to heal the family. I told her I'd think about it, but honestly, I don't know if I'm ready for that. Matthew says if I go, he'll go with me, that he supports whatever I decide, and that means a lot to me. My kids sometimes ask about their Aunt Stephanie and why they don't see her anymore, and I don't know what to tell them beyond that. Adults sometimes have problems they need to resolve. Jackson is very perceptive for his 7 years, and I know he feels something happened, but I try to keep him away from all the adult drama as much as I can. I guess the question I constantly ask myself is if it was worth it. If publicly destroying my sister at her own gender reveal party, exposing all her secrets in front of family and friends, was worth it for the temporary satisfaction of getting revenge for what she did to me. Some days I think yes, that she needed to feel even a fraction of the pain and humiliation she made me feel. Other days I feel like a horrible person who stooped to her sister's level instead of being better than her. I don't have a clear answer, and my therapist says maybe I never will, that some things in life are that gray and complicated. What I do know is that my family will never be the same. Christmas dinners are awkward now, birthdays are divided, and there's constant tension at any family gathering because everyone knows what happened and everyone has their opinions about it. Some relatives think I went too far. Others think Stephanie completely deserved it. Nobody's neutral on this. And that's created divisions that probably will never be fully repaired. And that does weigh on me. Because even though I was angry with Stephanie, I never wanted to destroy the whole family in the process. A few days ago, Jackson asked me if someday his Aunt Stephanie was going to come visit us again. I told him I didn't know. That maybe, someday. He looked at me with those big eyes he has, so similar to Matthew's, and told me he hoped so because even though it's been a long time since he's seen her, he misses her a little. And that broke my heart because I realized that my actions, whether justified or not in my mind, are affecting innocent people like my kids who didn't ask to be in the middle of this mess. Maybe that's the part that's hardest for me to accept. That in my search for justice, or revenge, or whatever you want to call it, I hurt people who had nothing to do with the original conflict between Stephanie and me.